Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. Eid Mubarak. I'm Preacher Moss, host of SOS, the Shout Out Show. Worldwide shout out to Muslims who are celebrating this particular Eid. I hope you had a beautiful time with your family. I hope you had a beautiful time with your deen and your faith, and you got to reconnect in the things in your life that are important. Also, want to give a shout out to Sister Satana, who was out on location today, taking part in her Eid festivities out in New Jersey. So we may have her poke in, we might have her pop in, maybe not pop in. I don't know. But I think this is a really appropriate time to actually begin talking about what I think is some of the subject matter of today. We already have some people in the queue. We're going to get to them in a minute. But I am going to just start out by saying, this particular subject matter is, again, I'm calling it it's a celebration of sacrifice. We have two Eids in the Islamic tradition. One is Eid al-Fitr, which follows Ramadan, and the other one is Eid al-Adha, which follows the pilgrimage to Hajj. I thought that it would be interesting to kind of broach those things out because in every religion, there's a concept of sacrifice. In all Abrahamic religions, you have stories and narratives about sacrifice in what you believe in, sacrifice for who you serve, who you pray to. And I thought it was really interesting because I began to, in some regards, normalize it. The story of why we have Eid al-Adha is that Abraham, which is a prophet in all Abrahamic faiths, is tested by God. And God tests his faith to the point that he says, I don't want your faith. I want your belief that whatever I'm telling you, what I'm telling you to do, is what is supposed to happen. And in this test, many of you know that he's asked to sacrifice his son. The interesting part is when he's talking to his son goes, Did Allah tell you to do this? And he goes, yes, Allah too. And the son has absolutely no hesitation. He tells him that we have no more discussion, things like that. And in the end, of course, he's tested, but Allah gives him a lamb to slaughter as opposed to sacrificing his son. And what I started really thinking about was this whole concept of sacrifice. I mean, we have the biblical stories and narratives, but you know what? I think sometimes the value of sacrifice really gets lost in the shuffle. And it's lost in a couple shuffles: entitlement, arrogance, greed, pride, all these type of things. But when we really start to talk about sacrifice, I mean, there is a miracle to it. Like every woman I see with a child, I was watching a program with my aunt today. I can't remember the show, but it's basically a black couple that have had 14 children. In this particular episode, this one young man had to have some skull reconstructive surgery, and it's tearing the parents apart. And as it would be. They're very emotional about this because the young man is only 3 years old. And what was interesting was how the father was able to zoom in on the innocence of the child. Let me explain what I'm saying. He was able to zoom in on the innocence of the child and understand that if there was a way to sacrifice himself in a way, the child, he would do it. It was the same thing with the mother. I mean, and I think it's not effectuated enough in conversations about why we're here, why we're successful, why we're protected, why we have growth spans, why we have maturity and things like that. And I think it's really interesting when we start looking at the fact that we don't really talk about sacrifice. The fact that we don't really talk about sacrifice in terms of plain speak. What does that mean? And I have my own philosophies about sacrifice. I have my own concepts, just like everybody else, because sacrifice is a very personal thing. You don't sacrifice like so-and-so sacrifice. Like you don't sacrifice like your mother sacrificed, like your father sacrificed, because everybody has their own conditions, if you will. Everybody has their own narrative in terms of not so much sacrifice, but decision making. It's interesting that sacrifice comes down to decision making, and your state of mind around your choices will affect how you sacrifice. We have a whole tradition of families and things like that, and growing up with mother and father in the house, growing up with no father in the house, growing up with no mother in the house. We tend to look at these things very myopically. Society tells us to do it, and I'll be very honest. For minority families, the idea is that we are not really strong enough, or we're not mature enough to have strong family structures. Despite the fact we created them anyway, the fact they were here before we came here, and we brought them with us. It is the idea, brothers and sisters, that folks don't thoroughly understand the process of a sacrifice. So we're going to be talking about that today. I hope you guys don't mind. We're going to go ahead and start the show and come back. And for everybody that's tuning in again, even Barter, let's start the show. Welcome back, everybody, to the SOS Shout Out Show. I'm your host, Preacher Moss. Listen, everybody, let's get it going. If you're coming for the show for the first time, I always say, please don't be a stranger. Don't be a wallflower. Get into the comment sections. Let us know who you are, what you think, and share your thoughts with people who will let you know who they are and what they think. This is a collective. This is a community forum. Don't be intimidated. Get down in that comment section. Let us know who you are. If you want to get into the notification button, the subscription button, all those type of things, you're more than welcome to do those things. But more importantly, it's like get into the discussion. I have been fortunate with the people on the show that I feel like I've been liberated from the whole idea of how social media is supposed to work. Social media in its infancy, of course, was another way to free or conceptualize communication and engagement. And I believe that. You know, even more so than that, brothers and sisters, and I'm going to get to everybody in the queue right now, stars in the building. I think even more so, brothers and sisters, as I began to speak more and more from last year when we started the show throughout the pandemic, and I use words like cognitive surplus. And what I found using the word cognitive surplus, and I'm going to tell on myself a little bit. I'm going to beat myself up a little bit. I put it so much in the space of independent decision. I put it so much in the space of an independent individual narrative that I didn't understand the power of group narrative and how people have cognitive surplus. I have yet to really go into that space talking about how groups make sacrifice. It's clearly oversight because we have things like Hajj, we have things like, Ash Wednesday, we have things like that. And I kind of overlooked it largely because, it made the case a little bit easier for our independent actions, of course, our independent interactions with people. So let me apologize because I've been remiss because today, Eid al-Adha is a classic reminder of, you guessed it, group cognitive surplus. Only in this situation can you get over 1 million people to come together. They don't know each other. They take planes, trains, automobiles. There's documented people who walk from Kuwait by foot to make Hajj. And it's interesting because that is a different level of cognitive surplus. That is a spiritual level of cognitive surplus. Thinking that you're going to go, there are stories of Hajj groups, people who leave the United States. They don't know each other, but they somehow become lifelong friends around the fact that they all went to Hajj together. I've seen people in airports. So that was my Hajj buddy from 1972. That was my Hajj buddy from da-da-da. And it's interesting because we forget in some regards how powerful that narrative is. We're going to get into that narrative in a minute. Let's go ahead and get our stars in the building out here. We got, of course, Sister Ree. How you doing, Sister Ree? You need to fire up that lasagna for tomorrow, sister. Don't be playing. Turkey lasagna. I'm messing with you. You fire whatever you want to. But most importantly, Ree, we want to thank you on Eid al-Adha and let you know that you're a part of our family because I know the sacrifices you made for your family. And again, we're going to take it outside of the whole aspect of religiosity and really talk about the grander scope of sacrifice. So, Reed, big up to you and Juwan and everybody and Derek. I wish all of you the best. May Allah be pleased with you. Next up, my brother Johnny L. Thomas. What's going on, beloved? JT knows a lot of this conversation that I'm about to have, but I think, inshallah, you will enjoy the larger conversation because I really want to talk about how we miss the reminders and the clues along the way. I just admitted to the fact that I talk about cognitive surplus, but I don't really expand it to things that are really like Hajj is a very, very big deal. Like Hajj is an extremely big deal. If you think about the merits of it, the history of it, the fact that it's a rite and a ritual that's been performed for God knows how many years without fail, minus the pandemic, very ritual. Like people go. This is a fifth pillar of belief in people tied to that fifth pillar of belief. The fifth pillar to make this Mecca, to make this trek to Mecca, to make do tawaf and be in the place of the Holy Quran. Think about that. Next up, Walaikum assalam rahmatullahi barakatuh. What's going on, brother Altaf? And Eid Mubarak to you. Altaf, feel free to jump in on this because I want to flex it out a little bit just in terms of the idea. But rein me in if I get too far out. JT, rein me in, rein me in if I get too far out. Samir, you too. Next up, you guys already know that the Altaf is Mr. 6 o'clock. He's the ambassador to the show, just in case you guys didn't know. I have to remind you. Samir, what's going on, brother? I tell you, brother, Eid Mubarak to you, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Samir is an aspiring writer. He's working on a script, a really good script about the last days of Mike Tyson and Tupac Shakur. And we pray that it's successful and you get your draft together and you become a big star and doing wonderful things. But I'm really proud of you, brother, because you're taking it from an idea, from a concept, to now you're beginning to write an outline and a treatment, and you'll get your script, man. So, again, I want to reiterate, you have my support. Okay, what we got to say? Kareem, what's going on, beloved? Good to have you on the show. Eid Mubarak to you. He said, Eid Mubarak, brothers and sisters. Well, Eid Mubarak to you, my brother. Thank you so much for spending your time on the show, on the shout out show. I'm going to throw some ideas out here about sacrifice. And I would love for you to chime in if you have some ideas, whether you agree, not agree. And it's okay not to agree, brothers and sisters. All right. Sometimes I don't agree with stuff I say, and I said it. So, feeling good that way. Next up. All right, we have the proprietor of BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. That's Miss Maxine B. Kate Esquire. What she say here? There you go. There you go. It's love on the show. It's funny when you have somebody send a message to somebody else or the show. It's almost like I need to move out of the way. But that's the way social media was actually supposed to work, brothers and sisters. Believe me, this is something that's a little bit beyond social media. It is the idea of practicing a certain type of etiquette towards people. And that is the one thing I want to talk about, sacrifice, the etiquette. Okay, next up. All right. Sister Sultana didn't put herself up, but I'm going to give a shout out to our consultant producer, Sister Sultana. What's going on, Sister Sultana?
Oh, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Mubarak to everyone.
Yes, indeed.
So I am out in the park. I'm going to flip my camera around. Maybe you can kind of see everyone.
All right.
You see?
There you go.
Okay. So yeah,
Muslims in the park,
celebrating in the park. But just wanted to pop on and just give everyone the Eid greetings.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this is such a wonderful time, and we're actually out in the park after COVID. So this is like awesome. Like, so we're just like,
are you guys masked up? Everybody wearing their mask though?
Say again?
Are people wearing their mask?
People are wearing their mask. But we are outside, but most people have their mask on. I mean, I have a mask. And so yeah, I mean, people are good. People are being good and everything. So
got Hajj.
Y'all got Hajj. And that's what, of course, this Idul Adha is, about. Also about, during this is the 10th day of the Hajj, and the month of Hajj, and also about the sacrifice. So, preacher's going to talk a little bit more about that. But just wanted to pop on. I'm going to go back into the back end.
All right. Thank
All
you for
right,
popping on. We appreciate you.
absolutely. All right. So I'm
Even Mubarak to you and your family.
Mubarak. Thank you.
So, one of the concepts of Eid is really a concept in all religions when you stop and think about it. All Abrahamic religions, they stand on the aspect of sacrifice. And the sacrifice, of course, is tied into belief. Because you normally will not sacrifice for something that you don't believe in, whether it's something you want to grow, evolve, something you want to protect, something that, God forbid, you're willing to die for, something you believe in. We have those levels of sacrifice. And I began to wonder, okay, what are the particular levels of sacrifice that get us to the point where we make one? I thought number one was awareness, acute awareness, to be in tune with the world and to be in tune with people and their problems is a very, very specific skill, an extremely specific skill. Let's be honest, everybody can't make sacrifices, right? I'm not saying that people are extraordinary, but they are extraordinary in their own ways when they can make sacrifices. Of course, the first sacrifice all any of us is going to understand at a meaningful level is a personal one, and that is the motherhood. Now, we talk about motherhood, we talk about mothers raising children, but we don't really talk about the aspect of sacrifice. And when I say the aspect of sacrifice, if you are a mother, you give up permissions of your body. A mother gives up the permissions of her body. Her DNA, her physical structure has to reconform to give life to a body inside her, to a baby inside her. And I begin to understand a lot more. Of course, I'm a man. I never had a baby before, right? But the idea, the evolution, if you will, of motherhood is perhaps one of the most misunderstood and underrated aspects of human society today. Because you find women who can have children in the worst of conditions. They may be in a refugee camp, they may be missing family, they may be in the worst society, but something protects that validity of life. Like they can still have life. And when you start thinking about that, brothers and sisters, it is fundamentally beyond, I like to say, beyond my realm of thinking. When you stop and think about the amount of sacrifices, just think about how many people there are in the world, right? Let's stop and think about how many people in the world that have one child. I told you earlier about this show that's on Discovery Channel with Black Family. 14 children. 14 children. I'm sitting here going, this is amazing. This is amazing because the process, if you will, to be able to put out one child, let alone 14, it is a sacrifice you really can't wrap your head around. And I think the other thing is an awareness. When I said awareness, it is the understanding that as a life giver, I am also a life protector. So in giving life, there's a sacrifice, but in giving that life or having a life, there's a protection to it. And that protection is yet another sacrifice. When you really begin to think about society, and jump in here, anybody who wants to, when you really start to think about society, society is, yes, about people who are righteous and pious and people who are not. We could say good and bad, evil and righteousness. We could say, but I realize that it comes down to the righteous and the pious are willing to make sacrifices. And the evil and the unpious and the unethical and the immoral people, they're not willing to make sacrifices. They're willing to sacrifice other people and sacrifice other things. A principle is only as good as the threat at the end of it. And the threat at the end of it is, will I uphold a principle or will I compromise on my principles? When you think about so much of life that's happened, I often talk about our brothers and sisters who were slaves, if you will, who suffered oppression. Our brothers and sisters that suffered oppression. It's interesting that the oppressors, to be oppressors of any merit, have to sacrifice them. They have to sacrifice their lives. They have to sacrifice their futures, their educations. To remain in a place of power, you have to make those sacrifices. Not for yourself, but on them. And the proprietary action, if you will, is that they will continue to carry on those sacrifices. It's interesting when you watch the current arguments about critical race theory. I thought it was about people, oppressors being held out as oppressors, that you've used the law to oppress people. I now understand it that it's not just that, it's the fact that you sacrificed the law. You sacrificed the good in law and legal precedent to uphold this facade, if you will. And when you have people that come along, brothers and sisters, I have this thing about black history. I have this thing about, black and brown history, and I have this thing about white history. White history here in the United States is clearly about sacrificing other people. Black and brown history is about sacrificing for the rights and abilities of black and brown people and oppressed people. And that balance, brothers and sisters, comes from the fact that we're dealing with people who at their core, I'm saying at their core values, are very empty. There's a void there. And, I was watching Fences again. And there's a scene, you guys have seen it, Denzel's talking to his son. They're supposed to be working on this fence. And the son goes, how come you don't like me? And he says, what kind of damn fool question is that? He goes, how come you don't like me? And I've just begun to understand why Denzel Washington got so angry. The young man, unbeknownst to him, questioned his father's willingness to sacrifice for him. And when he goes down the list, you eat my food, you wear my clothes, I put a roof over your head. What he doesn't get to the fact is, and I wish it would have happened in that play, he says, I already gave my life to you. Your mother gave her life to you. You are living in an expression of love that you can't pay back and you clearly can't understand. You can't say when it started and you don't know where it'll end. And in that space, brothers and sisters, this whole concept about sacrifice, it becomes a lot more fuller, a lot more richer, and a lot more clearer. It's funny because people are weird about sacrifice. Even religious people are very weird about sacrifice. I'll be riding down the street and I watch people. I'll see people asking for help with a sign, and I'll see the look in people's faces, and it's a look of disgust. Like, I don't want to sacrifice. I don't know where this money is going to go to. It's probably going to smoke it up, going to drink it up, going to do drugs. And you can clearly see the need because that person is pushing a cart in 101-degree weather with clothes and a TV with no place to plug it in. Clearly, he's a person in need or she's a person in need. However, in a religious setting, a fundraiser will have a fundraiser show you a video, talk to you about certain things, and solicit funds from you. And we don't have any hesitation about the money, where it's going. We won't see where the money is going. We trust that it's going to be a well being built. We trust that it's going to be food. Inshallah, it is. But what's the difference between the two? Is the sacrifice for one somehow inferior for the sacrifice of another? Or is it we've gotten to a space, brothers and sisters, where our arrogance and our haughtiness and our pride somehow allow us to delineate and choose who deserves mercy? And that's the other thing you should know. When you truly sacrifice for something or something you believe in, there is a modality of just not purpose, but mercy that's attached to it. You know, the mother that works an extra shift at work, the father that works an extra day, the teacher that stays after school to make sure the children understand the concepts that are being taught, the grandmother who may intercede when her child and her grandchild are not clicking along, the doctor who goes, "Hey, I worked my shift here, I worked all my shift, but I'm going to go to this clinic." And it is the idea that all of these things, amongst everything else I said, is tied to this, not a special brand of mercy, but a very consistent brand of mercy. And as we talk about Eid al-Adha and loop back to the story of Abraham getting ready to sacrifice his son, he doesn't sacrifice his son. He's told, sacrifice the lamb. But in his sacrifice, what does he find? He finds a greater understanding of mercy. A greater understanding of mercy. Because we don't know how God works. We don't. We don't know how the human mind works. Unfortunately, I've been privy, and many of you have been privy to cases where, sadly, parents kill their children. And they asked why. And they said, "The Lord told me to do so." And you sit here going, this is, And then you think about Abraham, who's shown mercy. And then you think of these people who do these things, they do these acts. And I'm like, I don't know. Did somebody speak to them? Was it mental health, or were they touched? Because, so much, brothers and sisters, if you really start to think about it, so much around us has to do with life and death. Who lives, who dies, we don't know. As my father says, not so poetically, ain't none of us gonna get out here alive. And I agree. But the sacrifice, maybe the aspect of the sacrifice is the thing that allows us to be here, to serve our brothers and sisters, to serve our Lord, to, in some regards, keep a balance in his ecosystem between good and evil, up, down, right, left, and yin and yang, and all those things. Because I've always found that serious sacrifice always brings about balance. You know, I had the pleasure of speaking to somebody a couple weeks ago, an old classmate, and in our conversations, I remember that he would always, like, once or twice a year, he would do this thing for kids. He was a musician. He would try to get these instruments, and it was always a hassle for him trying to get the instruments. He'd have more kids and instruments, and he would try to get the kids, and he would work with them for 3 or 4 days, trying to teach them, introduce them to music. And he's well into his 70s now. And I said, "Hey, do you still do that?" He said, "Yep, I still do." And I said, "Well, how have you done it all these years? There's no money there. There's people don't want to sponsor you, and then you don't have a nonprofit." He laughed. He said, "Do you really think I would wait for a nonprofit?" He said, "I'm pro people." And I thought about that. I said, "Is the aspect of being able to sacrifice for one another, this new phrase called being pro people, being changing the whole idea of pro life, if you will, being pro people, pro humanity, pro humanity." I'm like, this is an amazing thought process. And I find myself getting caught up on it a little bit, brothers and sisters, because the ruminations just kept going, going, going. Right now, my mind's going in a bunch of different ways because you know I think we make sacrifices to get to the next sacrifice. That to get to that next thing, you must eliminate other things. You must take things out of the way to be a great this or to be a great that. You must sacrifice along the way. To be a great mother, that means you can't do what you used to do. To be a great father means that you can't do the things that you used to do because your core understanding is that there's a person in the middle of this situation, a child, if you will, or elder, who can't sacrifice for themselves. Now, look, I'm going to get out of here, but I hope you guys enjoyed this whole idea. And I want you to think about a bigger concept about the idea of sacrifice. I want you, if you can, think about some of the people who sacrifice for you. Small list. In fact, shorten up the list. Maybe 10 people. Who in your life have sacrificed for you? Uh, we won't say why they did it. Maybe you want to ask them why they did it if you get a chance, if they're still here with us. But also, what did they sacrifice? And then try and figure out what's the currency on that sacrifice? What's the valuation on it? We always talk about in business terms. We talk about opportunity cost, if you will. What do you think the opportunity costs were for that person to sacrifice for you? And I want you to reverse engineer it a little bit and have fun with it. And in the end, maybe you call that person or maybe make the offer for that person. You just say thank you. It's not a lot. Maybe just say thank you. So for everybody to help me out and been in my space, sacrifice for me, that list is long and deep. Let me just say thank you and I pray that Allah blesses you and rewards you for your good deeds and your generosity. Brothers and sisters, I'm out of here. I just want to say have an amazing Eid, the rest of it, and let this be a situation that just carries over. We have some other stuff. We have some Sultana, we have some people in the box here. I know I missed some folks. Mother says happy Eid. Out of bio, what's going on now? All right. Mashallah. Okay. What else we got? Oh, we got Sister Aika came on. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sister Aika, Eid Mubarak to you. Happy news, brothers and sisters. Her son is doing better. And her family is recuperating from COVID. Alhamdulillah. Indonesia is a tipping point right now for COVID. So let's make dua for our brothers and sisters over there. All right. Let's see. Remember the influence of Hajj on Brother Malcolm? Absolutely. Absolutely. You brought up Brother Kareem, you brought up an amazing point. Yeah, I remember. Let me tell you something. Reading about his Hajj and his autobiography changed a lot of hearts. It broke through some really hard hearts. While we were religious and we were black Muslims and things like that, man, that ideology, man, the power of God to pull people together, it was shocking. It was transformative. It was transformative, if you will. All right. Every Eid will be Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Adha. I post Fun Day by Stevie Wonder. Fun Day. I love Fun Day from the soundtrack for Jungle Fever. And let me say that was an amazingly powerful soundtrack. If you get the soundtrack for Jungle Fever, pick it up. That was great. A great soundtrack. Yes, it is Fun Day. So listen, everybody, we're going to get to our sponsors. We want to give a shout out and a huge thank you to, of course, BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Call 1-888-496-6845. Again, that's 1-888-496-6845. And as well, we want to give a shout out to Bayan Islamic Graduate School. I had a great talk with Brother Munir Sheikh. Big up to you and Brother Jihad Turk. Big shout out to you. Listen, everybody, if you're thinking, okay, well, of course, I'm telling everybody here right now, if you're thinking about expanding your intellectual capacity for Islamic understanding and Islamic theological placement and appropriate, I want to say theological exercise, if you will, which is really inclusive of things like Islamic studies, Islamic leadership. And this is not, I want to point this out before I get it. This is not a thing where getting a degree in Islamic leadership, Islamic studies, is just for the Muslim community. No, there are more people hiring folks with these degrees than in the Muslim community. I'm going to be honest with you. The fact that you have a master's program for divinity, for Muslim chaplaincy, this is the only program that's doing that, brothers and sisters. And they are hiring Muslim chaplains all over the United States, not just the prisons, but colleges, universities, all over the United States. They don't have enough. So think about that. And Bayan is there to help you every step of the way. I'm a witness. I graduated this year, got my master's and Islamic education, and hopefully you will see me using it very, very soon. But until then, brothers and sisters, man, have a wonderful day. Eid Mubarak. And inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Be Jamas, the SOS.